I got the name Corky day one. So the only time I was ever named Roy was first day of school. So they'd say Roy Taylor, and I'd kind of raise my hand up, no, it's Corky. So that was, I could go another year by Corky. So I've always gone by Corky.
It's not too bad.
It was a military name. I mean, there was a lot of Corkys. Something about it, I don't know, but I played.
Did you get to earn that name, or
no, not really. No. So it was, you play Little League Baseball, and there'd be 3 Corkys on 2 teams, so everybody's name.
It was the new John back then.
Yeah. It really.
Everybody says Corky. Everybody looks up.
Yeah.
Well, good. So I kind of want to kick it off and start talking a little bit about the story and the history of Peerless. So before we talk about the whiskey and the bourbon that you're producing now, kind of give the story of your family and how this really evolved.
Okay, how it evolved was obviously through my great-grandfather. He was born in Poland. He was a Polish Jew. He moved to New York City, to Manhattan, when he was 5 years old. He was selling papers on the corner when he was 7, 8, 10, 12 years old. And when he saved up some money when he was 19, he said, I'm going to get on a riverboat, and when I run out of money, that's where I'm going to get off. Why he didn't get off in Louisville, Kentucky, I have no idea. He got off in Henderson, which was a good thing. Walked up the top of the hill, had 0 money, and he asked the bar up there called Puckett's, can I sweep the floor and can I live in the attic until I get myself squared away? And about 2 years later, he ended up buying the bar. But what he really wanted to be was a banker, and that's what he was. He went from Henderson to St. Louis for a short period of time because there was a lot of Jewish people from St. Louis, so they kind of took him under his wing. He became a banker and moved back to Henderson, opened First National Bank. And in 1889, he bought a small distillery from the Worsham family. Mr. Worsham had passed away. He bought the distillery. They were making about 8 barrels of bourbon a day, and within 2 years, he had some weeks he was making 200 barrels a week. So he took it to a pretty good. At one time, there were 220 distilleries in the state of Kentucky. He was probably in the top 5 or 10 during that era.
Do you think he looked at it as a purely investment, or was it like something they enjoyed?
No, I think he looked at it as an investment.
Yeah.
I think he was pretty money-driven. He built one of the largest breweries this side of the Mississippi, the Henderson Brewing Company, and the way he distributed his beer during that era was all by riverboat. So he had his own riverboats and went to Cincinnati, to Louisville, down to St. Louis, and he built that into a pretty good-sized brewery. But his love was Chicago. That's where all his buddies were. You couldn't do this today, but back then he sat on the board of 5 different banks up in Chicago, but he owned the Palmer House up in Chicago. It's probably one of the most famous, some people have never heard of it, but it's the longest running hotel in the United States. First hotel to have a light bulb, telephone, elevator, dishwasher, and air conditioning.
No iPhone? Not the first iPhone?
No iPhone. iPhone's next to the beds.
No, I think that's, but they invented the brownie, so that's what they were famous for.
Okay.
So.
I like brownies.
Yeah.
We can do that. So I guess kind of help me through the timetable here. Now, was your great or great grandfather?
Great grandfather.
Okay, so was this lost during Prohibition or like?
It was.
Okay, so kind of talk about like how that sort of.
He had it up till Prohibition, and he had about 63,000 barrels of bourbon he had to get rid of. He was hiding, if you can hide 50,000 of them in Owensboro, because they had huge warehouses. There's some big distilleries in Owensboro, and they had big fences with ivy on them. So he was able to hide a lot of barrels. And it took him about 3 years to get licenses to distribute alcohol during Prohibition. So
nobody was coming there day one trying to bring out the hammers.
I think they probably were. I mean, the distillery in Henderson was pretty wide open, and that's the reason why he would sneak at night over on 17 train cars to Owensboro to keep barrels over there and keep them hidden. So the government, you're right, would have gone in there with axes, cracked them open, poured them out. So he thought that he could get a license eventually, and it took him about 3 years to do so. So then he got a license and was able to distribute, where he distributed a lot of his alcohol, and we found this out. Rocky Wirtz up in Chicago, it's Wirtz Distributing. Now it's Breakthrough, but they were it was a I guess he knew about my great grandfather, and before I got up there, he told us that my great grandfather sold the Walgreens. Everybody's familiar with Walgreens, got one on every corner, right? But he sold them a little less than 40,000 barrels of bourbon during Prohibition, which was a big deal back then. So they partied pretty hard in the Palmer House for years. This wasn't one of these 2-week parties. This went on for like 10 or 12 years during Prohibition. But he was able to get rid of all his. Then he shut the distillery down. He shut it down before that.
So it was more like a liquidation sort of thing, is what he was trying to get out of it.
Yeah, he'd already sold his stills in 1917. Prohibition came along in 1919, so he must have known something was coming on. So in 1917, he sold his stills to United Distillery up in Vancouver, British Columbia. And what he did, he hired Mr. Sherman here in town that owns Vendome. They're the largest still builder in the United States, probably the world. Hired Mr. Sherman, brought his family to Henderson, his wife and 4 kids, stayed there 8 months, broke them down, went up to Vancouver, about a month on the train, set them up, spent 8 months up there, came back here, and that's where they got some of the money to continue and to build Vendome with. So I went in there 98 years later, and they told me it was your great-grandfather that helped put our great-grandfather in business.
So they were like, well, you need a still, so we're going to go ahead and just bump you up near towards the front of the line. This is your repayment.
That wasn't really it. No.
So talk about the idea now. The family legacy of distilling and having your own whiskey had been lost for a few generations, and now you were at the point of just saying like, screw it, like let's start making whiskey again. Like what was that real determining factor that wanted you to start pushing towards that?
Because he had a legitimate story.
Yeah,
most people are like my great grandpappy, and you're like, you're not even related to him.
Yeah, well,
it's not even close.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what, I had a big company, and I had a financial services company. I sold it to a group out of New York, 50th floor, Rockefeller Center. I walked on the beach in Sarasota, Florida for a year and a half, most depressed I've ever been in my life. I said, I've got to go back to work. So I came back. I had a home here in Louisville, and my youngest son, Carson, was a builder, and I said, let's do something. I don't care what we do, let's do something. So we had a lot of history with my great-grandfather and my grandfather running the distillery. So we said, let's build a distillery. We went down to Vendome and walked through the door and said, we want to order a still, and started looking for buildings here in town. And Carson was a builder, so we found this building down on 10th Street that kind of lent itself to do what we wanted to do, and ordered the stills, and he started the building. Took us almost 2 years to the day to build the building, or to convert the building to a distillery. And
why'd you choose that building and that location?
Well, I just felt like that if I got the building, and maybe when our bourbon came out in 6 to 7 years, part of Louisville would be heading that direction. It was pretty much gone. New Lou is great, but there's not many places left in that end of town. So I thought in 6, 7, 8 years, Louisville would be heading that direction. So it was in kind of a rough area then. It's starting to get better as we go along, and when we get the park built down on the river, it'll be better yet. But I just thought it would work out, and it had a loading dock. It was about the right size we wanted, so it's worked out. I think it's worked out very well for us.
Why not? Oh, sorry.
No, I was about to say. I mean, do you see that as more of like Louisville's having a renaissance period? Because you had a choice. You could have gone to Bardstown. You could have gone back to your hometown.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Why not
Shelbyville?
Why not Owensboro? Because OZ Tyler's making a great name for themselves.
Sure, they are.
There.
Yeah. Well, Henderson's my hometown. I mean, that's, I feel like that's where everything started in Henderson. But I felt like that. I like Louisville. I knew Louisville was coming along with the bourbon renaissance, with bourbonism and what was going on, and that was even being talked about 4 or 5 years ago. So I felt like, with Brown-Forman being here, and just a lot of things going on in downtown Louisville, I just felt like that I'd go ahead and take the chance, and in 5, 6, 7 years it would kind of head our direction. I'm not too far off. I mean, a lot of it has to do with luck. You have to have a lot of luck doing it. But as luck would have it, I think that we're in the right place at the right time. and we made a decision that we're making our own product. I don't source anything at all. So I knew our bourbon's not even out. It won't be out till June 22nd. So we're actually, waiting a little bit over 4 years for it to come out. I'm holding off. I could bring it out today if I wanted to, but I'm bringing it out on my dad's birthday. That's the only generation we skipped. We skipped the third generation. I'm the fourth. Obviously, Carson's the fifth. So in honor of my father, I'm bringing it out on his birthday.
Oh, very cool.
So, I mean, back to the Louisville thing, I'm assuming that you're going to pay a little bit more money up front to actually sit here and have your home base and being headquartered in Louisville than trying to go and, be in Owensboro or be in Bardstown or something like that. Did you look at this and saying, this is where the population is going to grow, this is where the tourism is going to expand, we don't have to convince people to come, like we're already just like another dot on the map of the Louisville bourbon kind of experience, if you will?
Absolutely. I mean, with the convention center right here, I mean, you know what's going on here with the farm machinery shows. The big shows are here in Louisville. The convention center, at that time, I didn't know it was going to be torn down and start all over, but that's okay. We got through that 2 years, so did everybody else. But during that era, they were building like an unbelievable amount of hotels in this town. I think when I started, they were building like 10 hotels. And then it come another couple of years, and then there's 20 new hotels. So those people are going to do something. They're going to go places. And I wanted to be in Louisville so people could come in and take a tour of our distillery and know the family, the history, because I really believe we have about as much history in the bourbon industry as any distillery in the whole state of Kentucky. And it might be saying a mouthful, but I mean, when you go back,
Fred No's going to have a response to that one.
Who's that?
So Fred No
or Indian Beams.
Okay. Well, Jim Beam is DSP number 230. We're number 50. So
I want you to also tell that story too, because I know that you also fought to have your original DSP back as well.
Oh, fought! That isn't the word for it. I spent a year and a half getting that number back. I mean, we started from my great grandfather. I can't tell you how many attorneys in this town I went through and what we had to do to get that, but I was bound and determined that we had DSP number 50. It took us a year and a half to get, almost to the day, a year and a half to get that number. First time in history the government's ever gone back to give a DSP number back to a family. So we were able to get it, and I called the fella when we got it, and I said, okay, what would my number have been if I'd just filled the paperwork out the way you wanted me to? 20,232. I said 50 looks better up on my building.
That's hard to market that.
So
and they're like, I have all this history, but we're DSP 20,000. Like, yeah, right. Good call.
So the new numbers are in the 22,000s.
Yeah.
And there's a number of them in this town that are 22,000. So, but no, I mean, when you mentioned Jim Beam, they're 230, we're 50. When you mentioned Buffalo, they're 113. Wild Turkey's 139. Makers is 444. I know them all. So number 50 is a big deal. It's not such a big deal sometimes in the United States when we do tours down there. Okay, we're number 50, but you bring somebody in there from Japan, you bring them in from Scotland, from Ireland, and they see number 50, their eyes light up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, you have got to have a lot of history with your family to have DSP number 50.
When you're going through that process, at any point were you just like, this is too much? Because we've dealt with TTB, we've dealt with the laws, we've gone through, and I don't even know if they know all the laws and all the restrictions. So at some point, did you ever think like, let's just give it up? It's gonna take way too long to get this 50 back.
I did, but you have to keep in mind we were going through the construction era that time. We started, and it took exactly 2 years to go through it. So I started that process even before we started. When we first bought the building, then we had to get we had to get permits. That takes time to do. So I was working on 50 from day one. So I just felt like that I'd finally get it. Mm-hmm. So and we
perseverance.
Yeah. So I never really, I just thought I'd get it.
So you're a financial guy. So like, when you're looking at starting a distillery and the investment it takes and the return on investment and were you like, this is like, what was your mindset going into this? Like, I know you wanted to bring your family's history back and like do all that, but talk about pulling those triggers, like, even though your brain's probably like, this doesn't make much sense. Like,
no, it when I first, we weren't going to be, and we're not that big today. We're a small distillery, but when Carson and I got into that, we were thinking along the lines of a smaller, about half the size we are. But then I guess my financial background kicked in, and I started figuring, I've got to do X amount to make this many barrels, to make this many bottles, to be in this many states. This is what we need to be. And then we wanted to make it where we had complete control of what we were doing. So my mindset was, we've got to make it a certain size. We have to make it this way. And I think we had it down to a pretty good science. People ask me, well, were you aware of the construction costs? Well, Carson having a financial background or a business background on building, I pretty much knew what it was going to cost us to build. And, putting barrels away, we've waited. I mean, we waited for our rye whiskey to come out in a little over 2 years, and now we're waiting over 4 years for our bourbon. So people don't do that. They go and they source it, they put it in a bottle. This is my product, same old game everybody plays, but I just couldn't do it. I had to do what I wanted to do and keep it and make it, keep it and hold it and put it out when it's ready to go.
Why was that so important to you?
Because I'm building a distillery to stay. I'm not building this distillery to sell. We're building it as a family. We're building it for people who work with us, and we call them family. So, I'm the fourth generation. Carson's the fifth. He's got boys that'll be the sixth. They don't do that anymore. You all know all the distilleries in the state of Kentucky. So there's only one or two owned by the family. Everybody else is owned by this one, that one. Mm-hmm. We can go all over the world and talk about that. But I think in order to have respect from the big distilleries, what I call the big seven, and to have the respect from other distilleries around the United States, I had to do it my way. And that's make my own product. When it's ready, it's ready. And as luck would have it, that's kind of what's happening to us.
So talk about so you say you want to do it your way and your own product. How did you define that or come up with, like, this is my set of, these are my standards, this is my ethos?
And don't give us some we source all our corn from 50 miles away, because that's somebody else's story. I think there's got to be something here.
What it makes, when you look at a bottle of Peerless, what do you tell people to see in that bottle? Like, what's in it?
Well,
not just whiskey. I know it's whiskey, but
it's just good whiskey.
We understand. Everybody makes it the same. Run through the same stills. They put it in a barrel. They pull it off the still at 160. They put it in a barrel at 125. They water it down. They put it in a bottle at 92 proof. That wasn't. We wanted to have complete control over everything that we did. And in order to do that, we had to have the right computer systems, which we did all our own software. We had to have the right grain operation. We had to find out what would make it the best product. It was in 1964. It changed from going in the barrel at 110 proof to 125 proof. So they did that for cost. But going in the barrel at 110 proof actually makes a better product. So I put it in the barrel at 107 proof because it might creep up a little bit. And then I take it straight from the barrel right to the bottle. We don't add one drop of water to it when you take it from the barrel, once it's aged, to the bottle. So the bottles that you see right here are probably 108, 108.1, 108.2. We wanted to give it the best flavor profiles we could possibly give it. The other main reason why I think that we're making as good a product as we are is we're sweet mash. Everybody's familiar with sour mash. You hold the mash back, you pull it forward. That isn't the way. We're a military family. I want this place clean. The joke is I want it battleship clean. I want that place spotless. When we make a product, We steam clean, we clean everything. You won't see a hose on the ground. You won't see a pressure gauge spewing. You won't see any of that. Everything we have is controlled. We could cook exactly at a certain temperature. We ferment exactly at a certain temperature. Everything is controlled. And I think that's the reason why we've received the accolades that we have since we started. And we're going to continue. We're not going to be cocky enough to think that we're doing it exactly right. We're doing it better every day. Everything we do, we're going to buy better equipment, better systems to make sure that we're on top.
What kind of those better systems are you investing in today?
Well, we have a continuous still, but there's there's just ways to make that still run better, run hotter, run faster. So basically pumps and gauges and things like that we have just exactly complete control over. So we don't make a lot of product. We only make 10, 12 barrels a day. That's probably all we're ever going to make. I don't have any aspirations of building a distillery that's going to be line up to Jim Beam or Maker's Mark and making 1,000 barrels a day. We're going to make, we might make 12, 15, 16, 18 barrels a day someday, but not today. Mm-hmm. So we just want to have control. If you can have control if you're the size distillery we are today. When you get way up there, you're just making product. And don't miss on all bourbon coming out of Kentucky is a good product. We just want to have the best.
Do you think the decision to, like you said, stay small, like really focus on quality, do you think you would have made that same decision younger in your life if you were